is, gosh, the day after Valentine's Day. Hope everybody had a great Valentine's Day. It's February 15th. Welcome to the Podetize client coaching call webinar. And we've got a fun, I think it's going to be a fun topic. I'm dying to hear what you have to say about the subject, Tracy, because you are the resident expert when it comes to all things, I would say, interviews, because you've done a really just incredibly high volume of them.
Yeah, I just did a tally up of it, so I'll talk about that.
Cool. All right, so let's get to this topic. Welcome everybody who's here live in the webinar and on social. This is a good one. You're going to enjoy it. Let's just get right to it. Hey everyone, welcome back to Feed Your Brand. I'm Tom. You know what? I'm going to do that again.
Okay, let's go again.
I want to, fumble later, they'll edit it out. Fumble in the middle of that point, not good. Sorry, guys. All right. Hey, welcome back to Feed Your Brand. I'm Tom Hazzard, along with my co-host and better half, Tracy, who is back from some travel. And boy, we have a great topic we want to share with you today. This has to do with picking podcast hosts to do a guest swap. So, Tracy, you are the undisputed expert in this. You've done a tremendous number of interviews in your podcasting and, I guess, columnist career. And I know you have wonderful words to the wise to share. So I would really want to turn this mic over to you. And I'm sort of going to be the sidekick to you on this episode, I think.
Ask me the questions, the burning questions, right? Because that's what interviewing is all about. So here's what I want to explain first. What's a podcast swap? Like, you may have heard this term. It's kind of a term that's thrown around the industry. What a podcast swap is where someone else has a podcast show, you have a podcast show, and you swap and guest on each other's show. That's the idea. So it's not a podcast swap if they're a YouTuber only. It's a podcast swap if they have a podcast show and you have a podcast show. And by that, I mean an active one, because obviously they're not going to have you as a guest if they stop their show. So if they pod faded, doesn't count, right? Because they're not going to invite you on. So we want to have someone who's already got an active show and you have an active show, and you're going to swap and be guests on each other's shows. That's the idea.
Makes sense to me, a podcast swap. I like it.
So why do you think this works, Tom?
Why do I think it works? Well, you're really providing each other value. You're getting exposure to each other's audiences. I mean, why it works, I mean, it probably works on many different levels, right? It works to give you exposure to their audience. They get exposure to your audience. So from a selfish perspective of being a host, you get value out of it, and they probably feel the same way.
Well, that's conventional wisdom right there, right? Like, obviously, like, you have shows and you're swapping, but here's the real key to it. The real key to it is the fact that they already have podcast listeners, and you already have podcast listeners. So you're not inviting a guest who's a TikTok influencer. You're not inviting a guest who has Instagram followers. You're not inviting a guest who has YouTube followers only. You're inviting people who are like for like. Podcast listeners listen to, on average, 7+ shows in their playlists. So they're more likely to click subscribe and listen to your show too. So you're more likely to actually get more listeners when you podcast swap with another podcast host than you are to get listeners from having a TikToker on your show. You might get TikTok followers, but you're not likely to get podcast listeners from that, because if they're already listening to somebody else's show, they already are interested in podcasts.
No, I agree. That makes the most sense, because it's an easy ask. It's not such a leap for someone who's not a podcast listener to then think, oh, I need to go listen to a podcast. What app do I have? How, do I do that? If they don't do it very much, right? So it's really easy. And this is something that we've seen happen, where we have some customers who will post something on social, let's say on Instagram, a clip from their podcast, a video clip from it, and they get 200,000 views of that, little video on Instagram, but then they have a lift in their podcast of about 1,000 listeners in that month, not 200,000. And why is that? It's what you just said, Tracy. Not everybody is going to come from that social over to listen.
Right. But we see a significant jump in listeners happening and in growth to your subscribing base, because where they go back and binge listen to all your episodes, right? When there is a podcast swap. So any host who's been doing this for some time will tell you that the best lift in listeners happens when another podcast host is on their show. It's just what happens naturally. So that's what I'm proposing to you to think about, to put that into your strategy. So in the early days, if you're just starting your show, I recommend one podcast swap at minimum per month when you're just starting your show. You could do more, but at least one is going to help you with that show listener growth that you desperately need. But we're going to talk a little bit today about how to be more effective about which podcast host you choose, because that matters too, right? We want to choose the right fit host for our shows, not just any podcast host. So, but the idea is right? At minimum to create that. Now, I personally, my show, The Binge Factor, has only podcast hosts on it, right? Like it's just that. However, I dial that in a little deeper and I invite in someone who I think might make a good partner for us. So if there's a partnership possibility in terms of the services that they offer dovetail nicely with our services, or the advice that they give is very similar to mine, or things like that, then I will more likely to invite them on than I am just any podcast host, because my show is geared for that, but that makes it actually a little more aligned, because if they're going to listen to my guest who has a podcast show, they're getting advice from them about podcasting, they're more likely to click through and listen to me just by that swap that happens. So, or in addition to that other show, they're going to listen to us too. So that's why I do it that way, the partnership model. So let's thinking about what are the 3 characteristics that I look for in the right podcast swap. I want to make sure we have a matched audience. So if I'm looking to attract, because I have a community that is only for women, I really want to have women on my show. Like it's just, it's not being sexist about it. It's just a match for what I'm trying to do. So be really clear in your audience target, especially if you're just new starting out and you don't know what it is. Have a target in mind and be thinking about, is this matched? And you clearly sometimes can't go by what people write about their show. You have to listen to it. Check it out. Is this a good match for me? Would the right type of people that I'm going for be attracted to this? Could be, how much money will they spend? I want really high-end clients, and that's the goal of my show. So I really don't want to go on a show that's all about doing it yourself and bootstrapping things, right? So making sure the audience match is there in some way, shape, or form is really critically important to that's my number one criteria.
I like that. And as you say it, Tracy, it occurs to me, I bet there's a lot of podcasters who don't put in the time to actually listen to the show of someone that they're considering having on their show. And I understand a lot of times people don't have as much time as they'd like to, but it's a pretty important step in that process. Would my audience be interested to listen to this show? Would I even be interested to listen? Do you think it's going to provide value to your audience to have that guest on your show and they go listen to theirs? Or is the show not all that interesting? Is it a dud? Is it not a good fit?
Well, and the reason why I say if you're going to do this, you have to listen to the show is my number 2 thing is that you should have a matched view or perspective. And I want it to be like, it can dovetail. It doesn't have to be exactly the same style. It doesn't have to be the same energy. It doesn't have to be all of that. But if I don't believe in what they're saying, I can't have them on my show. So it has to have some matched perspective or intention and in the right way. So there are people who will never get invited on my show because their advice to the podcasting industry is not in the best interest of the podcast host. It's just not. They're selling them something. They're selling them smoke and mirrors, and I know it. They're lying to them to get them into their programs. They will never come on my show. And there's a list.
And you know that because you screen them out, right?
There's a list of those people that are no-nos on my show. So if they ask, they're an automatic no. My team knows because I know that what they believe in and what they're doing out there is not in integrity with what I want to put out in the world. It's just it. But you can't always tell that if you don't listen. So that's the two. And then I like to make sure that they have similar promotion or publication integrity. And that is in a sense that we believe in people who publish every single week. If they're not at least publishing weekly, then first off, they don't have enough guest opportunities for you to be on their show too. So either you'll be out for 6 months before you get on their show, or it's just not at a pace that is reasonable to do an exchange. Right. So that's the first thing, is the publication schedule matters. But to me, if they aren't then pushing it out on social media or adding it to their website, and they don't have to do all of that, but if they're not at least doing one of those things, then they're not serious about their show. And if they're not serious about their show, then they really don't have listeners. They can say all they want, but I know for a fact they likely don't have listeners because I see it. I know. I can tell the difference by watching what they're doing on the outside, whether or not they have listener growth. And that's not, I don't want to be in someone who's not going to promote me if I'm going to do all this work to promote them, right? We has to be mutually beneficial. And that happens by checking their website, checking their social media, and seeing how they promote their show. Now, they may not be doing the best practices. They may not be doing it exactly the way I'm doing it. But I also think that maybe they'll learn something from me. So if there's an opportunity for that, as long as they're making an effort, I'm more than willing to share with them my model, and hopefully they can learn from that.
This makes perfect sense, Tracy. I mean, you've got to be, you have to give value and you have to get value out of it. And if that's not in alignment, then you shouldn't do it.
Right. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for alignment. That's why I say matched audience, matched perspective, matched promotion, right? Or match sharing, like you can call it that. So that's it. But what do I want in differences? I want a difference in energy. Because if they probably have a lot of listeners who've been listening to them, and maybe it's that they haven't decided to buy from them, or they haven't decided to join their platform or their courses or their programs. They haven't stepped into it because maybe that host has the right information, but not the right fit in terms of personality. And so me being so different and such a different energy level might be actually a draw. In contrast. So that's always good for me. I like it when there's an energy differential. I also like it when there's a style difference, right? My style's less technical, right? I just don't go into no, we do it here. You guys hear us. I know my nitty gritty details, right? But I don't do that when I'm being interviewed. I'm giving them the why, the perspectives on things. And then that other stuff comes in as backup stories, other things there, but I'm not going to dive into it. So if their show is all really technical, sometimes me providing that opposite, that why, those purposes can really help that host to have a better show and helps to draw people to listen to my show in addition, right? Because now we're providing both pieces for them. And that's really a great way to make sure we're both winning.
I think that's an important thing, especially for a lot of new podcasters to understand, Tracy, is that I think a lot of times I've heard hosts say, well, but if I invite them to be a guest on my show, are my listeners going to like their show better than mine? They get a little hung up on that. And I think that that's a mistake, right? I mean, there's, as you said, most podcast listeners will listen to many different shows on a regular basis. If they like yours, they may like another one also. And I don't think we should get hung up on whether they're going to like us better than that other show, or maybe this guest, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my audience to this show because I'm going to like them a whole lot better. They're much more experienced than me. What do you have to say about that?
So competition, right? This fear, this risk of competition is the wrong attitude to have in if we're going to lift all boats, if we're going to increase our industry and promote everyone at once. Our good friend and great podcaster, host of the Note Closer show, Scott Carson, he says co-opetition, right? We're cooperating and we're competing together. That's okay. I'm not the flavor for everyone. I know it. Sometimes my overexcited energy is just too much for people. There's got to be some more laid back Zen kind of coach for them somewhere else. And that's okay, right? That doesn't mean that I'm wrong or they're wrong or that, we're competing against each other. It just means that there's more room for everyone in that model. And that's what we're looking for. So that competition model mindset, it's not going to be good for you. And if you are in that mindset, I don't know why you'd have this style of show. Create a totally different style of show. And that might be a debate and argue with your competition show. And I did that. I have a guest on my show. It's actually, I think it probably is aired already, but it may be airing in the next couple of weeks, where I aired someone on the Binge Factor who I completely disagreed with. And he swore to me that I wouldn't air it, but I did.
Really?
I think you can guess disagreed. Who it is.
No, I'm actually not thinking of it.
I'm going to look it up and make sure it's aired just real quick. Well,
I had your show up actually in podcast app. I have it still here.
So I'm just going to double check it and make sure. But
all right.
What?
Well, that I think was very good of you to have someone on that you completely disagree with. And I think it's important that you had I'm sure you did it in a at least a respectful way, but that you're transparent about how you disagree with the person, right?
Yeah, well, I think that this is really something that we have to really look at carefully. It's if you're going to disagree with someone, you have to kind of narrow them in and have to focus them, because otherwise it's just not going to work for you. And,
so let's see, the most recent episode.
No, it's not. It hasn't aired yet.
It hasn't aired yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'll put it in the chat for the blog post for this episode, so everybody can find it when the time comes. And
so I think that's important for people to see. That probably. Did you expect that? Did you know you disagreed with the person, or you didn't know it until you conducted the interview?
I didn't know it would be so contentious on the interviews, right?
Really?
I mean, I didn't expect it to be that kind of. Yeah. I mean, I just didn't expect it to be that.
Fair.
Yeah.
I'm interested to listen to that one personally.
Yeah, it definitely hasn't aired yet. In fact, I don't even see it. Well, no, it has. It has.
It has?
Yep.
When did it air? What is it?
It aired on 10/12 of
10/12?
last year. So that's why it was actually a lot
ago.
Longer. So it's Albert Corey. I
know who he is. Yeah. Okay.
So anyway, so we'll put that in the chat. We'll put that in the blog post for this episode, so everyone can access that. But I really felt like it's good to put a perspective on it. But I framed it, and I told him I was going to do it. Right? I was straight with him. So if you're going to say, "Hey, look, I think we disagree on it, and I think we should present that idea to everyone," go ahead and do that, but be straight about that.
Yeah,
and he's not competing with us. He just has a different view on what goes on in the world. So
sure, I think that's a very good way to do it, and you never want to publish something and frame it in a way that is gonna shock or surprise the guest you had on your show, right? I mean, I think, because you don't, and I don't think many.
But on the flip side of it, I'm not willing to be on his show. That's what came out of it, right?
Is that what came out of it?
Well, yeah. I mean, I knew that. He didn't invite me, but why would he, right? When I disagree so vehemently about everything. But I wouldn't go on his show because I don't want to step into that audience. It's not a match for me. It's a waste of my time. And I just don't see that it would be worth my while. I learned that really quickly interviewing him, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the reasons I'm going to say this to all of you. I invite first. I invite first rather than wait for an invitation from them.
Because then you're probably, is it because it's harder for you to say no when you've been invited and you want to make sure you're inviting for the right reasons and not just having someone else frame what shows you should be on or something?
Right, because very likely your guest is going to feel that law of reciprocity weighing on them, and they're going to be like, I need to invite that, her on. And I don't want to be in that position where I have to say yes. Because of
or you don't want to be the person to say no and have really what ends up being a uncomfortable conversation, right?
Exactly.
To put it
so
mildly.
I always invite first, or really schedule out so they come on my show first, and then I'll like cancel on the back end, like or just didn't book yet. Like that's usually happened. So I just do it that way because I prefer to give first. It's who I am and how I show up anyway, right? And then I have a busy schedule. And look, I get asked on hundreds of shows a year. And I don't want to be on 100 shows a year. I don't want to dilute my brand that way. I want them to be a right fit for me. So I just will like, hey, I had you on my show where promotion is happening. I'll get on your calendar. And then I just never do. And they don't remember. And so I don't really worry about it. If they push hard and come back to me about why they want me on the show, it's like, Tracy, you never booked on my show and I really would like you on it. Oh, okay, great. I'll do that. Very rarely does it happen the other way. So, and that's okay, right? Like it happened this week. I was interviewing DP Newton, and I love him, and he's got a great show. And I really, honestly, I was shocked he wanted me on his show because I didn't think it was like quite a right fit for me. And we had so much fun on the show that there was no way I wasn't going to invite him on my show. And it was just a random, like I didn't seek him out first. Like he met me through Podmatch. And so he did invite me on, and I agreed to go on his show. And then because I was intrigued by it when I listened to it, and curious about why he wanted me on there. And we had so much fun that there was no way I couldn't invite him on my show. Like it wasn't gonna not happen in the other way. So that was a good fit. But it rarely happens where I don't invite first. It's just my model. But you do your own. Right. There are lots of people who they're like, I need you to have me on your show, or they've pushed into the first place. And I just feel like that's not the right energy for it. Right. Okay. So I want to be invited on the flip side of that because it's a right fit for us. And the swap is right for us. So I just do it that way. The other thing is that I really have to be careful that, and in the case of, some of the people that you might have on your show, especially if you're doing this competition model, is that we don't get into a place where we're being associated with someone without integrity in the services that they provide, in the coaching that they provide, the messaging of what they provide. I don't want to have them on my show and have that and have to discontinue their episode in the future. And I've done it before where I'll delete an episode or delist. I don't delete, I delist. So it won't appear in the podcast app anymore, but I remove it from my blog roll, but I don't. So I untag it everywhere in our blog. This is the technical way we do it, but the page is still live. So if they've linked to it, they can send people to it.
Interesting. So do you actually no index, no follow the post even? Do you do that?
I have done that for a couple of people, like someone who got in trouble with the SEC. I did that, but I didn't delete it because a broken link is a negative on your website. So I don't delete it. And that's something that I make a very clear habit.
Sorry, I'm getting a little technical on people.
Yeah, we're getting technical
that's
there.
Like for a blog post, you sort of can make sure Google doesn't actually send traffic there. There are some things you can do. So they say, hey, this page is here on my website. Don't pay any attention to it. It's kind of like the wizard behind the green curtain. Don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain. Yeah. So here's my numbers. And I didn't give you this at the beginning because this is not who I am. It's not how I show up in the world. I don't brag about me. It's not how I start. When I start in a podcast, when I'm being interviewed on a podcast, I'm about the audience that's there and what value can I bring to that audience and to that host. But that doesn't mean that some point in the process, I want to make sure that you understand my credibility.
and there might be a story to that. So I recently gave a speech about AI, but it was really about how asking good questions and being a great interviewer and having done a volume of interviews over my lifetime here. And this is really only in the last 8 years that I've tracked this number. I don't go back farther than that. In the last 8 years, I've done 3,003 interviews. That's my number.
Quite a bit.
180,000 minutes of interviews.
180,000 minutes in 8 years. Okay.
Of those interviews.
Yep.
And I do on average 375 a year.
275 what a year?
Interviews. Either I'm interviewing someone else or they're interviewing me.
That's more than one a day, Tracy.
I know, which I typically do have two. I usually have 6 to 8 a week.
That would do it.
Right. So that's my range, is usually somewhere in there. So it'll be like, it could even be 8 to 10 on a weekend I'm home and then nothing for a week while I'm away. Right. Like it just does. But the numbers add up. But in doing that, there's a clear distinction in number. And here's what I find that podcasters do over time. When you hit over 100 episodes and 100 interviews, now maybe not all your episodes are interviews, right? So when when you clearly hit over 100 interviews, you will start to be more discerning. It happens every time. It's the number one thing I hear from everyone with 100 episodes or more. I've decided to get more specific about the kind of guests I want. I reject more than I invite on. This is the common theme that happens over 100. Why not start that sooner? If it's going to happen anyway, and the biggest growth in your show happens from 25 to 100 episodes, that will be the largest growth curve you will have. You'll have steady growth after that, but the largest growth curve will happen between 25 episodes and 100 episodes. If that's going to happen, then why not start to dial in as early as that your criteria? Test your criteria. Each month, get a little tighter on it, and a little tighter on it, and a little tighter on it. Could be a really great growth strategy for you and your show. Could be.
Yeah, no wonder you don't have time for me to take you to lunch most days. Holy mackerel, Tracy. That's a lot.
Well, I end this call and I have an immediate interview with someone from France. So
wow.
Yeah, I'm busy. That's it.
You are. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
I did clear my schedule for your birthday.
Oh, great.
Well, mostly. I cleared it for lunch.
Mostly. Oh, mostly.
Mostly, not the whole day.
Not the
but
whole
I cleared
day.
it for lunch.
Been married for over 30 years and I don't get a whole day. All right.
You don't get a whole day. Sorry. It's your birthday. Yeah. So for everyone out there, just really think about this. Podcast swaps are a great part of your guesting strategy. They can be a really effective growth for your listener base, especially when you do a little bit of work. It doesn't have to be a tremendous amount of work. Check the fit on the audience, the fit on the perspective, and the fit on the fact that they're actually going to promote you. And if they're going to do those 3 things, and those 3 things are a good match, then take the risk. Have them on your show, invite them first. They'll reciprocate, because if it's a good fit for you, they'll realize really quickly in that interview it's a good fit for them, and you don't have to work hard to pitch them at all.
Sounds like some great insight, Tracy, coming from someone with 3,003 interviews, and wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing that perspective. I even learned a few things today. I mean, we've been podcasting. Actually, we started podcasting together when we started doing it, and I wasn't aware of all those numbers.
Well, that's because you didn't also seek the guests. I didn't about 90% of that work of the guest seeking over the years in all of our shows, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've kind of refined it over time.
You have. Well done. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening, everybody. We will be back next time with another great topic. Until then, this has been Tom and Tracy Hazzard on Feed Your Brand. All right. Wow. All right. Let's see. We got a couple.
So Ruth, to answer your question here, Ruth asks, when you invite, do you right away suggest a listener swap? I plant that as an idea that, maybe that will happen, but most often I just invite them on the show because I say my show and your show are similar and a right fit. So I'm planting the idea in their head that both have shows and they're focused on the right audience, or they're focused on this topic, or they're focused on that. But I'm not saying, hey, I expect to reciprocate, right? I don't say that. That's implied. I keep it low key because I want to have them, because I actually really respect it when someone says, I don't think you're a fit for my show. I totally respect that because it happens rarely. More often than not, people are eager to have anyone they could get on their show.
And you're probably thinking, oh, great, you saved me some time. I mean, you probably don't, if they don't think you're a good fit, you probably don't want to waste your time with that, right?
Right. And I have had people who would say, I'd love to come on your show. I'm not sure you're a right fit for my show, but let's find out. And we do the interview, and 9 times out of 10, they go, yep, I definitely want to invite you on my show now. Right. So think of it like a little audition. So when they have fun with you, they're going to invite you on.
I agree. And, it's interesting. Scott commented that, you do have to do a little bit of the most hated word out there for success, which is work. You have to do work. Well, so that I
don't consider this a lot of work, to be honest with you.
This is where I'm going with this. Okay. I agree. To get what you want out of it, you have to be willing to put some effort into it. No question. I agree 100% with Scott on that. And I was really intending to have a light moment and joking a little bit about, don't have time for me to take you to lunch, or I don't get a whole day for my birthday. That was meant to be funny. But because I have to tell you, I mean, living and working with you every single day, I am kind of shocked at the numbers of, 380, whatever, a year, more than one a day, because while you're often recording a podcast episode, yours or someone else's, I don't feel like, oh my gosh, that's all you do. I don't. I mean, it's a lot of episodes, no question, but I don't feel like for you it's as much work. I feel like you're doing it because you want to do it, because believe me, if you didn't want to be doing it, you would not do it.
Well, think about it this way. Like one of the really underserved things, and the thing we didn't talk in that, is that I do want to see what my competition is doing. So I'm a significant researcher, right? Tom, you know that.
Yeah, you do. You do your homework.
No I'm question. Always checking out shows. So if I'm constantly checking out shows, it's easy for me to pick someone to invite on.
Yeah, no, you listen to a lot of podcasts,
right?
And you also read a ton of books. I mean, you're just a voracious consumer of information, and these are the primary ways you do it, right?
Right. And this is the thing. Look, Podmatch, I love it. We use it all the time here. It serves me up some really great choices in the last month. What I find is that the premium version, the pro version, whatever you want to call it, does better. If I have someone on who paid for the pro version, they're better fit for my show. And they already meet a lot of the criteria. And you can see in there if they're a premium user.
It's only like $54 a month, isn't it?
It is.
So I mean, not that that's nothing. I mean, it's spending some money, but it's not a whole lot of money for, really the value that it provides you, right?
Well, what I find is that, look, one of my criteria was that I want to see that they're committed to their show, right? That they promote it, that if they're putting some money into that guesting side of it, it says to me that they care about the guests they have on their show. They care to find a good fit. And they're comfortable with podcast swaps because there's just as many podcasters on there as there are guests. So most of the guests I come across are both a podcast host and a guest, and interested in both. And so it really works out for us to use that. So that's one of the ways that I do it. But I don't just accept what the AI says. I click through, check out their website, and listen to an episode. Like I just, it takes me 10 minutes because I don't listen to the whole thing. I listen to the beginning, I listen to the start of the interview, and I listen to the very end. I will totally listen to an entire episode before I guest on their show, but this is my spot check.
This is just your pre-qualification, really.
Yeah.
Right?
If their website is all like pushy salesy with lots of like pop-ups and like download my free this and download my free that, they're pretty much a no right there for me. It's too promotional. is just not a fit for me.
Makes sense.
And so that's like so I don't even listen to it if that's the case. So out of every 7, you get 7 a day. I do it once a week. And out of that first 7, I'll typically find 4 that I think are amazing and invite 4 on my show. That's it. Like, it's easy. It takes me 1 day a month. I do it.
Well,
and I try to do it every
month?
week. Yep. 1 day a month at minimum. I can book my entire, because I book 8 a month. So I will do 1 day, book 4. And then a week later, I'll book another 4. And that's how I ended up like booking 12. Like, I end up overbooking for my month because I've been doing it on a weekly basis to test it out. That's how I haven't got overbooked and booked more episodes than I really should do in a month. But yeah, that's why I'm way ahead on my schedule right now. I had to scale back a little. It's a good thing I went on a trip for 2 weeks. It like down my schedule.
And actually, I talked about this, was it last week or the week before when I was talking about consistency in podcasting? I did mention in that episode how on Feed Your Brand, you were recording more episodes lately, not for Feed Your Brand, for Binge Factor. I'm sorry. You were recording more episodes lately and publishing them new, but then changing the dates of one per week to backdate it to fill in a gap.
I had a 1 month gap. I've more than filled it.
Consistency, right? But
so that's why I didn't know that. For those listening, Albert Corey's he was one who got moved.
It was published more recently, but it got moved back.
That's why I didn't know it published, because
timeline.
It got moved.
That now makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
I was like,
it actually published in January, but got moved. But so I published 2 a week until I could catch up and do that. I'm actually still publishing 2 a week, but we're keeping them right now only because we caught up on the gap that we had. We had a gap in October because I was traveling so much and we had a big gap that month. And but now because I'm recording so many, we have too many and I don't like to get more than a month to 6 weeks maximum out in my publishing schedule.
You mean
so
from
date of recording to date of publishing?
Yeah.
Because I don't want someone to lose the energy of the interview, excitement from wanting to share the episode. And so that's why I don't like to go out. 6 weeks is almost too much for me. 4 is ideal.
Got it.
So I've had to double publish because I've gotten too many pod matches that were good.
Hey, well,
I love that Scott's telling me to just feed you some tequila and a little pat on the ass, and that's good to go.
Yeah, it's all good.
He's right. You'd be happy with both those things.
That's true. Hey, Cody, any questions on social or comments?
Linda on Facebook says hi though.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Hey there.
No questions.
Linda West?
So far.
I don't
Connor.
think so.
Oh, different Linda. Hi, Linda.
Mm-hmm.
Dustin Matthews. Hey, I haven't heard from him in a while.
Wow.
Did you interview him today, Scott?
You must have.
Yeah, I love him.
Seen him in person.
Yeah, I caught up. Oh, good.
Oh, cool.
Good. I'll have to catch up with him. I need to do that. So I think he's back in Florida. So
yeah, I think he is too.
Yeah, and I was just there. I should have made time. Too much
You
to
didn't
do.
have time.
North Carolina.
Asheville, another fun place we visited.
It's such a beautiful place.
Time. Yep.
Cool. So anyway, well, I have another interview in 15 minutes. But I got time for some questions if anybody's
if we
got
have any
any
more questions, comments, now's a good time. Thank
you.
you.
Hey, Cody, have you been taking guests on your show yet? Or are you still just reviewing the movie?
No, just film reviews right now. I want to get into a situation where we start to do some guests. So I would love to be in this conversation when that happens for sure.
Well, and this is the thing, go ahead and, check out on Podmatch, go use our tools, go check it out and find out if there are other shows that are doing movie reviews. Mm-hmm. And you could talk to those hosts. That would be a great first step before you start inviting actors on or directors on or all of those things.
Of course. Yeah. I think that's kind of my plan, is because we've been getting to know Podmatch so well. And I've kind of been writing my own plan on the sidelines here about reaching out to other movie podcasts and kind of compare and do a couple different things. There's a segment that I'd like to do. Why does a movie work for you and it doesn't work for me in a way? What's your approach when you go into a film and you're ready to critique it as well too, to kind of pick the critique's brain a little bit, because
Yeah.
what do you look for in a film? What are you looking for to talk about in a film and such? And there's so many, art is subjective. So it's fun to me to understand what someone else is looking for, or why a scene, a movie, a moment means much more to them than it did to me. That's the most intriguing part for me. So that's something I want to start lining up here pretty
Scott
soon.
Kirsten recommends you
Brett
check out the
Allen.
Brett Allen
Yes.
show. And, this is a really great way. Like, look, you could look at each other as competition, or you could look at each other as co-opetition. And wouldn't it be great if, like, you really learned that they like this style of film, which isn't your forte, and you happen to watch one and you go, you know what? I think you would like this better.
Oh, yeah.
And you reference that and you send that movie over to them. And, that might be a great way for you to work together as because you can only review so many films.
Exactly. And I kind of want to help create that community as well too, in a way. And then once we start getting analytics and downloads, and me and JT put our feet in the right avenues, then we can start touching upon, I guess, what you would call a celebrity in the field, I guess.
That's what Scott's suggesting.
Scott's commenting now about getting celebrities. The other thing you do is, obviously, JT is connected with my brother who's in Hollywood in that whole industry, and you probably use the network, get connected with some, and start to get a reputation for doing that.
And there are some, I have to say that there are some celebrity shows that are terrible, like they're really awful, but there's some that are really, really great.
And I agree with you. And the way that we're shaping our show and the way that we talk about the film, and really we're trying to get the film on other people's radar at the end of the day. So the way that I'm shaping the actual content of the show, I want it to appear well for promoting films for different studios, movie theaters, all that type of stuff. So I really want to make it an attractive avenue to start having these conversations and such. So that's my goal here, is to open it up to that.
But I think Scott's right in the sense that if someone already has a podcast, they sort of understand the difficulties of the media type. If they think about it like, oh, this is just another promotion vehicle for my movie, like radio or TV, they actually have the wrong attitude.
Sure.
And so that's where, like, I find the authors that come out and do serial guesting, like, have it wrong. And I so often listen to it, and they say the same thing on every podcast show, and they won't get on my show because of it. Like, so this is a clear path for you having someone who gets it already, and they're more likely to say yes because they love podcasting. You know what I mean? And they're like, they want to support a small show. So I honestly don't think you have to wait for some big numbers.
Okay.
Go ahead and ask.
Let's do it. I've been reaching out to many local artists as well too, especially doing plays in Orange County and a lot of short film creatives. We're in the Newport Beach Film Festival every year as well too. So I'm starting to reach out there and, put the podcast out there as like, hey, I have this is a great avenue for us to collaborate and talk about some things. So I'm in conversation with local artists for sure as well too. So there's a whole plan here.
And
I like the idea.
I hooked you up with that Oscar party. I think
exactly March 11th. It's on the calendar.
Also,
it's happening.
Don't forget, inject a little doubt. You want to say to that celebrity, I don't know if you're a good fit for my podcast.
Sure.
And then just going to want to be on it even more.
That's great. That's great.
So
Thank you.
Scott's got the idea of comedy clubs too.
Yeah, that is a good idea. Comedy clubs would be good. And Tracy, did you see what Scott commented about Mark Victor Hansen?
I did. So Scott mentions, and Mark has been on my show before. Mark Victor Hansen started using podcast guests to launch his most recent book launch with, when COVID kicked in. And that's absolutely true. Mark was on our show, but the reality is that he doesn't have an understanding because he doesn't have his own show. He doesn't have an understanding of how podcasting is different from radio. And it comes across in the interview.
Came across in the interview that he was behaving like it was radio?
Yeah, behaving like it was radio or a TV interview, and it doesn't work as well.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I really hope that I can break some people of it. I try to coach them when I'm done with the call, and I'll say, hey, there's going to need to be a lot of editing to this, and here's why. And, I try to push them into uncomfortable questions and I don't mean uncomfortable from there's stuff they don't want to answer, but stuff that's not expected that they get from everyone else, because I have to force a differentiation in their response. And so it's a lot more work for me when someone is like that. And which is why I don't invite authors on my show very often. They have to already have a podcast and know what it's like. So anyway, well, I got to run because if we don't have many more questions, I've got to prep for my interview.
Yeah, no more social media questions. So we're good to go here.
All right. That was fun.
Next week, what's our topic, Cody?
Next week, pull that up.
I'm so glad you're back, Tracy. It's much more fun doing this with you.
Pros and cons of solo and topic episodes.
So we're getting a lot of people who are saying this. Actually, Scott Carson, who's on, is one of them, who's moving to a lot more solo shows. I see this more commonly with people with 200 or more episodes. So remember how I said that they start to be more discerning with their guests after 100? Well, they start adding more topic episodes after 200. And I honestly think they should do it sooner. So I love that is happening. So this is something we'll talk about. Like, is it time for you to add solo or topic episodes in without a guest? Now, guesting is important because you need to boost your listenership, right? Yes. And we just talked about why that's important. So these tie together, and we'll actually make that tie more complete next week.
And the best, well, how do I say? I think, my computer's running out of memory, and I'm running this thing, so
you better hurry.
Holy mackerel!
This is because you have every window open.
It's time to shut down Chrome and restart it for the first time in like a month. Yeah. Really bad habits I have. Anyway, what was the point? Now I forgot what I was going to say.
Tying the episodes together.
Yeah. A lot of different new podcasters that we're working with are definitely considering a combination of individual solo casts and also guest interviews, and I think especially for a new podcaster starting out, that's a great plan, not only because your podcast is new and you may not really have a feel for what your show is about and what you want it to be, and I think experiencing a little of both can be good. It also provides listeners some variety, and you get more real world testing and more feedback back, I think, from those experiences. So not that a plan of all one way or all the other isn't a good way to start too. I mean, it's certainly,
well, sometimes
however you get started, just get started. Number one, right?
Sometimes podcasters they're doing live streams and a guest fails to show, and they got to cover with a solo episode, and then they find out the feedback was really great on it. So they do discover it sometimes earlier than others. So you might want to try some experiments. So that's what we're going to be talking about next week. Way to test your audience, ways to figure it out, and the pros and cons of doing it, whether it's the right time for you. So whether you just starting your show or you've been doing 200 or more episodes, this is a topic for everyone out there.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, thanks everyone. And great to see you all.
And we had a really good number here live earlier. A few people left, but nice to have more of you joining. Thank you. And please participate. Love to see your comments. And
I think we're going to have to do some statistical analysis, Tom, of the people who show up on our guesting and on our coaching here, I think tend to have better shows.
Okay.
Got to be something. And I think the numbers are going to show that.
Okay. I'm interested to check that out. Awesome.
Yeah. We'll have to do a statistical analysis. So thank you all for joining us. Appreciate you.
Have a great week.
See you next week.